Hello again. Thank you so much for being here today in this session. We are delighted to have Professor Denise Shasha. Denise Shasha is Professor of Computer Science at New York University in the US. He is a Julius Silver Professor and an Associate Director of New York University Wireless. He works on problems that resemble puzzles, including meta-algorithms of machine learning to achieve guaranteed correctness rates, causality algorithms with plant biologists and ecologists, automated verification for concurrent algorithms, a tool for policy planners facing epidemics, tree and graph matching, algorithms for time series for finance and devices to combat opioid deviation and flooding. Because he is easily confused, he has written the puzzle column for various publications, including Scientific American, Dr. Dobbs Journal, and currently the communication of the ACM. He is fellow of the ACM, an INRIA International Chair, and senior member of the US National Academy of Inventors. This is very incredible, Professor Denise Shasha. You are here today to present a very, very important topic titled AI-Aided Advisors, Design and Validation. So you said that you have developed a site called dietnerd.org, which answers questions about diet and health. The workflow starts with the query, then proceeds through parsing, pointing at the database relevance analysis, safety analysis, and summarization. The challenge is to ensure that the result is clear and accurate. This talk presents your design choices to privilege safety and avoid hallucinations, and your validation tests, blinded studies with human experts, as well as comparison with systematic reviews. You will discuss various generalization of this approach to AI-based experts on the wireless literature and standards and to financial investments. Thank you so much, Professor Denise Shasha, to be here. Thank you so much for this incredible subject. And I will let you introduce Sheila Wu and share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I'd like to introduce the first author of the work that I'm going to be talking about, Sheila. Sheila, I'm going to just say nice things about her because she's very modest, but Sheila studied math at New York University, and she happens to be the daughter of somebody who invited me to give a talk and approached me and said she wanted to work on stuff. And she's been like the linchpin of all of these large language model projects. So it's really a pleasure that she can join us. So I'll be giving the talk, but I may ask Sheila for her comments on some of my answers. With that, I will begin. I think we will easily be within the time frame. So I hope this is all visible.
Yes.
Okay, great. So diet nerd. I'm very proud of being a nerd. So I don't know whether this is a word that you all know, but it means somebody who studies hard, who focuses on one thing, and isn't very sociable. So that's me. And we've used this common framework of a retrieval augmented large language model, which means that we're always based on literature that we have reason to believe, which in this case is peer-reviewed literature about diet and health. Okay, by the way, if ever my voice is unclear or something, you guys will tell me. So the audience of our system is our everyday consumers. So you can actually go and click on that right now. And if you don't mind that you have to ask questions in English and get answers in English, you can use it. Health professionals and researchers. Because we can actually, if you're looking at something in the biomedical literature, you can ask Diet Nerd and we'll give you a summary, as we'll see, but it will also give you references. So let's see an example of that. So first of all, here are the kinds of questions we're tuned for, but again, you could choose other kinds of questions. And in fact, our running example will be different from these. So ketogenic diets are ones where you try to reduce carbohydrates. So none of your wonderful Moroccan bread. It's terrible. Turmeric is a supplement, and people think it can reduce inflammation. Some people are vegans, and so they have to worry about bone health and vitamin B12 deficiency and things like that. So those are the kinds of questions you can ask. You can see there are quite a variety of them, but you could actually ask general health questions as well. Although we're designing a site that's a sister site to this one, which will be more oriented towards health. Now, so here's a running example. I'm going to come back to how we produce this result, but just to give you an idea of what we're doing. So in a few weeks, I'll be giving a talk in Brazil, where they have these kind of berries. And the question is, therefore, are these berries good for your health? And so this is a summary that's automatically generated. It talks about, as you can see, it talks about the benefits. I'm not going to read it, but it talks about the benefits based on the literature, always based on the literature. It talks about safety and risks because we're very focused on safety considerations. It talks about anything that could be a limitation. Very often the limitation is that some subject has been insufficiently studied. So for example, there are many longevity vitamins and many of them have not really been studied. And then it gives a conclusion. So it's giving a summary. And this is actually, there are several sites that do something like this. And our summaries are good and some other summaries are also good. Now, the next thing that it does is it gives a list of references, which again, many sites do. But then what it does, which is somewhat unique, is it gives an analysis of the articles. So for each article, and again, this is all generated automatically. For each article, it says what is the purpose, what are the conclusions, risks, benefits of the thing being studied, which in this case are the berries. And then it evaluates the paper based on, for example, whether it's a randomized a blinded study or whether it's an observational study, because as you know, in science, the best thing one can do is one would like a randomized double-blind study. So randomized means that the people you give, let's say, the supplement to, or the people you don't, that's random based on some random choice. And neither the experimenters nor the participants know whether they're getting that supplement. That would make it double blind. So that's the highest standard. But of course, sometimes you can't do this, like for smoking or something like that. Those are all observational studies, basically. So sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't, but we think it's important for the user, especially somebody sophisticated, to understand whether this is happening or not. Okay, just a quick audio check. You can all hear me? This is all okay? Audio is good? Uh-oh.
I
Can
can
you
hear
not
you.
hear me? Okay, great. Okay, and now we also have another kind of paper that we look at and we evaluate, which are review type papers. Now, in the medical literature especially, there's a lot of emphasis on writing reviews because there's so much, the literature is so large that for somebody to catch up by reading the study papers, it's too much reading. So instead, what they do is people write review papers, and the review papers will look at a lot of the basic literature, a lot of the individual study papers, and then they will summarize them in some way. And so our criteria there are different because, for example, we cannot do double-blind studies in a review paper because the review paper is talking about other studies. And so our criteria are different, but things like search methodology, just to make sure that a wide enough net has been spread so that the right articles can be found. That's an important issue. And also whatever the conclusions are. So it could be that some supplement, some researcher thinks it's helpful, other researchers thinks it's dangerous. And so we want to see that, and we want to see that in the summary. So we do both. We do analyses of both kinds of articles. And I will show you in a minute how we do that. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to show you the system architecture. I'm not going to go through everything here, but just to show that basically what happens is you enter a query, we try to find similar queries. And if you're happy with one of those, then we answer based on some pre-generated answer with its citation. So we've already done all the work. So if you're happy with a previously asked question, we can answer it, and we can give you all the analysis instantly. Then we look at the validity. So if, for example, somebody asks about something that has nothing to do with health or diet, like, I don't know, what are the what are the exports of Morocco of a certain product? We'll just say, sorry, this is just not in our purview. It's not something we can answer. All of this is done without looking at the literature. We also look at a general query generator so that we can handle synonyms. So you ask some query about, let's say, some supplement. We might then we might generalize that to a query about related supplements. And similarly for points of contention. Points of contention are where some people think something is good, other people think it's either not good or not proven or actually bad. And we do this. This is one innovation that Shella initiated, one of the many, but where we do this for safety reasons. We want to surface any safety reasons under the theory that a disagreement could signify a safety concern. And then finally, so all of that is done based on the general knowledge of the LLM. And then after that, we go to PubMed, which is our database of medical and diet-related articles, in general biomedical articles. We get a bunch of articles, we classify them, we find the relevant ones, and then we look at the articles, we see how strong they are, and we find the strongest articles, and then we do the synthesis. So I'm going to go through how we direct the LLM in all of these points very briefly. Okay, so question validity. Just a little backing up a moment. The reason I'm doing this is that we believe that this kind of workflow is a good workflow for many systems. We're applying it to several other systems, and so that's why I'm presenting it to you. In our paper, we give more detail, and so you might find this useful, even if your application is quite different from ours. So it turns out that when you're dealing with LLMs, you have to be nice to it. So we start with a statement, you're an expert in classifying user questions. And then we give it examples, and then we allow it to try to form the questions. And so in this case, or in this case, we're not looking at questions, but we're saying is this a valid question? If it's a question that asks about how to feed my dog or cat, or how to feed my sheep, it's going to say, no, we're not going to answer that. We don't know about that. Another one is a query generator. So every database of articles has a slightly different interface. PubMed has an and/or keyword-based interface. And so here's an example. Is resveratrol effective in humans? And we're putting this example within the LLM prompt. And it says, okay, this is how you could ask that question. Here's how you could ask this question. So each question that's in English is translated to, in this case, a PubMed style query. Again, PubMed is this database of medical articles and biomedical articles. Now, this points of contention prompt, as I said, was very important because we wanted to elicit from the data, from the database, articles that are concerned with health, with safety. And so what we're looking at is points of contention, points of disagreement, and we want to see where those points are. So for example, we're looking at the efficacy of ginseng. This is an example we give to the LLM, and we give an example of the response that it might give. And similarly, we do it for a bunch of different points of contention. Again, this is to elicit safety concerns. So this whole approach of you tell it what you want. Okay, again, we have to be nice to it. So we said, you are an expert in generating precise and effective PubMed queries to help researchers find relevant articles. And your task is to list up to 4 of the top points of contention around the question. So where people disagree. Again, this is done before we go to PubMed, but this is generating PubMed queries. And so when we do this for our example query, then what we get is a bunch of points of contention. So one point of contention is how effective are these berries as antioxidants? Another one is how effective are those berries for weight loss? And so each of these is a point of contention. And because in the general literature it is, or in the public it is, and therefore we ask all those questions of PubMed. Finally, we ask, when we retrieve some articles, we ask, are they concerned with animals versus humans? In which case we reject them because we're focused on human-based studies. And we also determine whether the article helps in answering the question the person asked, or whether it's concerned with safety. And if in either of those cases, we consider it relevant. And so in this case, it found some relevant articles. And these are articles about these berries. Then we go and we look at the strength of claim analysis. In other words, do we trust this article? And we might trust it more if, for example, more people are involved in the study, if the study went longer, and if the quality of the study, was it a double-blind, randomly controlled experiment, then we would trust it more. And so we look at all these things. We also look at statistical aspects, like, is there a significance level test, a p-value test? What is the confidence interval? And finally, we look at conflicts of interest. So for example, if there's a study about, let's say, the benefits of some product, it's important to know whether the researchers were being either employed by the company that produces that product or were funded by that. Now, sometimes people don't mention what their source of funding is. We consider that suspicious. And here, this is a similar idea, but for the review articles. And as you remember, review articles are different because they're not going to have statistics in the same way. They're not going to have p-values because they're not doing a particular study. These are meta studies where they look at meta reviews, where they look at many studies and they see which ones are most are good and what they each say. But again, we look at sources of funding to see whether there's a conflict of interest. Okay, so now returning to our example, here's another article analysis. So as you can see, it says, what is the size of the study? Well, there are 30 people. How long did this experiment last? So our idea is that we're going to give a summary to the reader that lets the reader kind of decide, oh yeah, this study makes sense. It has at least a sufficient number of people, and it lasted long enough. So if we have one study with 30 people, another one with 300 that lasted longer, maybe we would trust the one with 300 more. But that's up to the reader to decide. And finally, we do a synthesis, and we say, okay, again, we say nice things to the LLM. We say you're an expert in evaluating research articles and summarizing findings, and you're going to do the review using only this information. We don't want it to hallucinate or use any other information. This is particularly important for diet because there's a lot of information out there that's of questionable truth because it hasn't been tested. Okay, so returning to our case study, we're asking whether these berries are good, and now you see all the steps that we went through to get there. So we look at the benefits and we look at the safety and risks, mostly thanks to the points of contention. We look at any research limitations. So for example, here, while there are promising results regarding the health benefits, many studies call for more rigorous and extensive research to confirm these benefits. So even the researchers think more work needs to be done. And they say, well, one of the problems is there's a notable lack of large-scale clinical trials and detailed toxicity tests, because after all, these berries in high quantities could be toxic. So we really focus a lot on safety. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk a little bit about the experiments we did. And to me, this is very critical, because if you ask ChatGPT or Perplexity or any such system, they give you these beautiful answers. You know, the English is good, or the French is good, or the Arabic is good, but you don't know whether it's really true. So what do we do to test that? Well, one of the things we did was we looked at the literature and we said, does our summary agree with the literature? Now, obviously, we cannot include the literature we're comparing to in our inputs. So we looked at things called systematic reviews. Systematic reviews are papers that have a question on the top, and then they answer the question. So the question might be like, in our case, are these berries good for your health? And then we'll look at the summary of the systematic review, and we'll compare it to our summary. And we'll see whether they were the same or semantically the same. So that's one kind of test we did, just to see that we weren't inventing stuff. And again, what we did was we looked at all of the literature from before the point where that systematic review summary appeared. And that way we can be sure that we get, that we're not cheating by looking at the systematic review to predict what the systematic review said. So that's one test. And the other test is we found some dietitians and we asked them to compare our system with other systems. So here are the results. If we look directly at text, like word by word, we're not very similar to the systematic summaries. But if we look at the semantics, we're very similar. In fact, we're over 0.5 almost always. And when we're not when we're not very high, mostly it has to do with the fact that we give a little bit more analysis. We do a safety analysis, and we remind everyone to check with medical professionals. And so we get a little bit of a semantic difference just because we're adding more information and advice. Then we asked domain experts, and there are a lot of nice systems out there, some of which you can only get to by paying for them. And our system here is the green. And sometimes we're not the best. Sometimes we're very close. I mean, we're usually very close to the best. Sometimes we're among the best, but by and large, we're very good. But this has to do only with the summaries. The article analyses and the safety analysis is much more unique to what we're doing. So we, we're among the best systems in in terms of these criteria. And so based on this, we've decided we're going to expand our nerd family, is what we call it. And we're going to have health nerd, and health nerd is going to be quite a bit like diet nerd, but it's going to also include some questionnaires to get a little bit more detail about whatever the question is. And it's going to include that as part of the prompt. But it's not so different from diet nerd. Wireless nerd is quite different. As mentioned, I'm the associate director for NYU Wireless. NYU Wireless, we do research on all kinds of wireless technology from the very base level to upper level protocols. And what we're doing here is we're saying, let us look at the literature, in this case, archive articles, but also at standards bodies, and see what we can answer about a given question. It turns out this is very useful to the companies that support NYU Wireless, and so they're very excited about it. And what we're now working on are two other systems, one called Investor Nerd, which gives investment advice, kind of generic investment advice about how you should allocate your many, many millions of dollars, hopefully, or whatever, in stocks, bonds, and real estate. It's not very specific. It doesn't say choose this stock, but what it would do is it will say this stock is risky or not so risky, or this stock has seen nice growth or not so much. And then contract nerd is a little bit different. Contract nerd looks at contracts like rental agreements and employment contracts and says, are there any clauses here that are very, very unfair? So for example, a bad clause in a rental agreement might be that if there's any damage to the dwelling, it's the tenant's fault no matter what. So even if something collapses from the ceiling, it's still the tenant's fault. That would be very unfair. Another kind of unfair clause in an employment contract would be if you quit the company, you can't work in the same field for 5 years or something. And this could be very bad. You should not sign such a thing. So that's what we're trying to do. And it's all meant to follow the same general workflow. And we think this is a reasonable workflow. And we're very happy to answer questions now and to welcome objections and anything you'd like to say. Et comme j'ai dit à l'avance, vous pouvez poser vos questions en français ou en anglais. And you can check out our site. Okay, I think we're ready for questions. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Shasha. It was a very, very insightful talk and a lot of information, lots of research. And I believe Sheila, who also did a lot of research there. Yeah, I had lots of questions. I was very interested because I already worked on LLMs and using LLMs on systematic reviews. And not so far, I worked with some colleagues on that, but we worked on how to do this systematic review and to detect, for example, the recurrence of cancer in literature review and systematic reviews. But today, all this kind of knowledge graphs and so on are today replaced by these LLMs. This is something incredible, but maybe researchers will be replaced in the future, in very, very, very near future. But yeah, very insightful talk. I have a lot of questions. I will start with this one because people already looked at some of your books, some puzzle books. And Omar is asking this question. In your puzzle books, you present problems in engaging ways. Do you think gamification or puzzle-driven learning should play more important role in education? And how might this approach be adapted for different cultural contexts?
Oh, I love this question. What I'd like to say is I think I'm a big believer in having students construct things, uh, and because I feel that people learn much more by constructing than by listening to a professor talk. And so in that particular class, which uses games a lot, we call it heuristic problem solving. I'll put it in the chat. In that particular class, I present puzzles, many of which are some of which are known, but most of which I have invented. And then the students compete and try to solve the puzzles by writing programs. So they're always constructing things, and we have a competition every week. It's a lot of work, this course. And in fact, usually the first day I get, say 50 people, and by the second day I get 25 because I scare them. um, but at the end, they all know each other. They've learned a lot. They give me reviews that say things like, well, I had an interview at Google, and after your class, the interview was a joke. It was so easy. And because it's a class in which it's really basically applied algorithms, heuristic algorithms, but still algorithms, they get to remember everything that they learned in algorithms and then apply it. And so I think it's a great way to teach. I mean, I certainly enjoy it, but I think the students enjoy it too a lot.
Yeah, sure. The second question is about this nerd engines. I see that you apply this on many topics, many fields, and healthcare and so on. This question is about the dietnerds.org. So the website focuses a lot on safety and avoiding hallucinations. You used interesting design choices to make that kinda possible. How do you think they can generalize to other domains? And how do you deal with cases where safety and accuracy might conflict?
Hmm. I would like to turn this over to Shella because Shella has been working a lot on hallucinations. Maybe you, Shella, would like to talk about how to generalize that.
Yeah. So in particular, I think a good example is with wireless nerd. So safety in that field and industry is very different than what it is in more diet and health. And so in terms of generalization, we still do need to do a bit of tuning it to whatever field that you want to apply it to. And so when you look at the prompts for wireless nerd, it's going to define safety in a different way, right? That way it's more about interference with signals and things like that. So in terms of generalization of safety, you still do need to give it some parameters in terms of like how should you think about safety and which things you should be looking out for. But in terms of the general infrastructure of, for example, the points of contention queries, that's one way that we generalize it. It's always going to look for those hottest debates around the topic that you're asking for, and it's able to apply that into whatever field that it's about. In terms of, I guess, how to balance out accuracy and what was it? Accuracy and what was the other?
Yeah, and safety.
Accuracy and safety.
They might conflict, yeah.
Yeah, I think that. Go
So
ahead.
I'm just going to say one thing. One thing that we did was we assumed that if an article is peer reviewed, then it's plausibly accurate. So if there's a conflict with two peer-reviewed articles, we think it's our duty to mention it. Even if, for example, one of those, I mean, you could conceive that one article faked its data and was still published. And so then there might be a question about accuracy. That is true. We agree with that. Shella, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you have anything to add?
No, not much to add on that part.
All right, let's move on to the third question. When you apply these approaches to fields like wireless standards or finance, what's exactly different compared to health from the perspective of next token predictor?
I have no, because we're not really dealing at that level, so I have no idea. Stella, do you want to have any comment on that?
So the questions of Ahmed are very, very impressive. Yeah. So I think I've worked a lot on healthcare, and here in Morocco, for example, some healthcare issues like diabetes, for example, there are a lot of research, systematic reviews, and so on diabetes. Could this kind of models and innovations like NERD and so on be helpful, and how?
Well, yeah, I think we definitely can be. I mean, we of course don't want to say that those systematic reviews have nothing to offer because clearly they do. We've only compared them on the conclusions. But if I were writing a systematic review now, I think what I would first do is use a system like Diet Nerd, see what it says, at least use the references that it found, see whether there are other references, maybe do a more detailed description to summarize the references. But I think it would be an amazing first start for a systematic review. Shella?
Yeah, I think in terms of finding, like, again, the points of contention, I think is one of my favorite parts about the system because it's meant to really find things that are it adds in a safety feature, but it's also meant to look for things that might not always be the most mainstream belief. And so, especially when we demoed it to wireless, like the wire listener to industry experts, they came upon certain ideas that they don't normally think about when they're doing their own search within research. And I think that's the same too within a medical aspect, where you kind of come across some ideas or papers that you might not normally come across, and it really kind of inspires more out of the box thinking.
Yeah. So this question is it's a broader question because it highlights the fact that in healthcare, for example, there is this question of ethics and usability and checking if the answer is correct or not, and accepting it and adopting it by a doctor. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, we're very concerned with that actually, because there's always the danger that people will use only a site like this as opposed to going to a medical professional. We really think of it as supplemental. We think of it as you go to a medical professional, first of all, it would be nice to be able to ask good questions and to have some idea, have an intelligent discussion with a medical professional. And so we firmly believe in that. We also believe that a good doctor will have a much broader and more detailed picture of their patient. And so our advice is deliberately quite generic and deliberately summarizing research articles only.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you believe that this kind of tools or innovations have to be checked with FDA or something like that? So go through all the process of clinical studies and Food and Drug
Well,
Administration.
we're trying to avoid that by saying all we're doing is summarization.
Okay.
Somebody's going to come back to us and say, you have to do more. Yeah. Well, so far we think because really what we're doing now is simply a literature search. It's not personal.
All right. All right.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, on our website, you'll see continuous like reminders and disclaimers of just that we're doing research summarization. This is not meant to take the place of any medical professional. And that's why constantly, and in our prompts too, you'll see that it's always instructing the people to go touch base with your provider, with your medical professional. And just to kind of echo what Professor Shasha said, it's really just so that people can, while they're waiting to meet with their advisor or with their provider, get educated on the topic, get some more information, and so that they can bring that to their provider and just really have a much more enriched conversation and really make the most of their time. When we spoke with the dietitians and the nutritionists, they told us a lot that at the clinic, it often takes a lot of time for people to even meet with their registered dietitian. And so in that intermediate time when they're waiting, they do have like a health coach that kind of answer some questions for them, but this is just another tool for them to, while they're waiting to talk to their provider, get more information, get more informed, and that way when they do finally get there, they can really make the most of their time.
Yeah, and the tool is only for English, or we
Right
can
now,
use
it's only
any
for-
language? Yeah.
that's only-
Okay, because here in Morocco, mostly people talk Arabic or dialect, and Africa and so on. And maybe these tools, if they are translated or something like that, could be very helpful and could be tested, right? So my very last question, I think, is this one, which is a very futuristic one. If we were to meet again in 2034, in 10 years, at the MoroccoAI conference, what advancements in AI would you hope to see realized? What role should initiatives like this one, so MoroccoAI initiative, and because MoroccoAI, we have also the role to promote AI research and education in Morocco and Africa, and also what's the role should initiatives like this play in shaping this future?
Well, that's a beautiful question. So I think a lot about people, for example, giving you intelligent glasses, which will tell you, here's this person, here's what you know about this person. Oh, you like this kind of meal, maybe you should go into this restaurant. And I'm thinking, it's cool, but a little terrifying. So, so because like you really wanted to know that much about you, and also it might it's just the complement to what Shella said earlier. When we look for points of contention, we're trying to give a variety of views. If it starts to follow your habits, it might get you more into your habits. So I think there's going to be this really interesting interplay between more help, but then being able to stop that help in some way, because you don't want that much help. So I think that's going to be one of the things that's going to happen. I think I think all kinds of jobs are going to change. As you said, researchers might be very different. I mean, research could be very different. Um, and so we're going to have to look for jobs, I think, that are going to be quite different. I think in 10 years, the job landscape will be very different. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I think when there are jobs that depend purely on expertise, as opposed to, for example, doing something, with your hands or with your body, or really understanding another person in a way that even a machine, even with the best literature search, could not, that those would be the more growth fields.
Great. My last question, because we need to have some advice to the community. What is your advice to this young community? Because we have a lot of young people. We organized the hackathon about innovation through AI. Last year, we organized the hackathon about Gen AI, 1 week of Gen AI. And people are using lots of these LLMs, are training them, are fine-tuning them, and so on. What's your advice in this era of generative AI, and what is your message to young people?
You mean how to use those tools or how to design hackathons?
Yeah, what is your message? What's your advice to them? Because all people are using these models. Maybe they are biased, maybe they are used everywhere, anyhow, and yeah.
Well, I'm going to give one piece of advice, and then maybe Shella, you could give yours too. So my advice is, it's actually my advice about all research, is you find a problem that's actually important, because it's easy to find problems that haven't been solved but aren't important. So you find a problem that's really important that could help people, and you try to use the best technology you can. Which, in the case of AI, it's very good at LLMs. It's very good at gathering sort of shallow knowledge, not so good at reasoning. So one of the things we're doing separately from all of the nerd family is looking at improvements to LLMs with reasoning, just because we think that's something very important. So that's my two pieces of advice. Work on something that's useful that not everybody is doing, and and sort of try to push that boundary. So that's my generic research recommendation. Shallow, you may have some other ideas.
Yeah. My advice might be coming from more of like a very on-hands perspective, but I think something that's really helped me keep up, because LLMs are changing so quickly all the time, and even the models themselves that are deployed, they're really well received in the beginning, and then you hear things that, oh, the quality is degraded, and a lot of the time I don't think I would know, I would be able to keep up unless I'm following on things, even like different subreddits that are specifically LLM focused. So I think really staying in tune with the community, because I think there was one point we were contemplating using 4.0. We used it for a little bit. There were a lot of hallucinations, and the reason why we thought to even check at a certain point about those hallucinations was because of staying in tune with the community, seeing people say, oh, I'm experiencing a lot of hallucinations with 4.0. Maybe we shouldn't rely on this model. So I think, yeah, just subscribing to all the different newsletters out there, staying in tune to all the forums has been really, really helpful throughout the development process. And something else that's also maybe not advice, but something to keep in mind on the ethics portion of it, is reading a lot of the papers that are about LLM ethics and thinking about also the environmental impact of LLMs. It may even sound a little bit hypocritical because I am using an LLM, but there is a lot of research out there that is starting to look into, are small language models just as effective in LLMs, especially if we're doing very targeted, like if we're applying it to a certain industry. It might have less of an environmental impact. And I think just keeping in mind those types of things when we're building things, sometimes larger isn't always better. Sometimes a small language model is just as effective as a large language model. And if we are wanting to improve and like do things for the benefit of humanity, maybe that's all that we need. And we keep in mind the environmental impact, because a lot of the times, large language models, they are very costly in terms of energy, and the communities that don't get access to these large language models are often the first ones in line that are affected by those environmental impacts. So I think that's something for all of us, including myself, to keep in mind as we move forward and as we continue to find these different innovations, that we just kind of keep those things in mind as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sheila. Thank you so much, Professor Denis Shasha. And this is the end of our conversation. And yeah, I don't forget to invite you maybe in April or May next year, inshallah. And you too, Sheila, you are very welcome to Morocco, and we'll keep in touch and see you, inshallah, very, very soon.
Inshallah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Okay.